Hello, this is Cissay's Collab Space. I'm your host, Amy Cissay. This is the Ask Me Anything series. The question I received was, how do users prepare for a OneDrive migration? So I have 5 tips to share. The first tip is to review the files that are still needed and get rid of the old files that are no longer needed. If you have duplicate documents, of course, make sure that you kind of reconcile those documents. That way, it's a cleaner migration and you don't bring in the old junk that's no longer needed. And of course, making sure that you keep in mind any records management, any retention policies that your organization might have in place, and how do you properly dispose of those documents if they are records, especially if you're in a government agency. That's very important. So you want to make sure you follow the guidelines that should be in place around how do you properly dispose of those documents. But that's the first step, I would say. Reviewing file extensions. So reviewing old file types that may or may not work when you migrate them over. If you have any shortcuts, don't bother bringing those over either, because they're not going to work when you upload them into OneDrive, because those shortcuts work on your file explorer on your machine. Any linked Excel files, those are not going to work either. So you want to be mindful of those as well. And you also want to take a look at maybe those old doc files or XLS files without the X extension. So be mindful of those. They may or may not work. Limit your folder paths. So people love subfolders on subfolders on subfolders. And perhaps think about how can you consolidate down those subfolders. I would say usually the person who created the subfolders understand the structure. And when you have to explain the folder structures to other people so they can understand it, chances are they may not. And that's if your organization is going to allow you to share from your OneDrive to other people. That's all around your governance plan. That should be set in place as well. And also just keep in mind that when you are migrating to OneDrive or SharePoint, even though you have a 400 character limit inside of the browser in those apps, if you go and then you do a sync, and the File Explorer has a totally different set of limitations, and there's going to be a lot of conflicts. I will create a video on that later because that's a whole different ball game of some of the gotchas that I've seen with syncing folders or files or libraries. I see a lot of companies get tripped up when they're syncing. So when you have subfolders, it's not the same experience as if you're working with the subfolders on your computer versus in the browser. Having people click back and forth between folders and going up to the back button to go to the next folder up from where they came, and only to find subfolders with no documents, because people love their placeholder folders where they intend to put items in those folders, but then they forget. And now people are digging down the wrong paths, and, they get frustrated and they say, well, this is why I don't like using this new tool, because I can't find what I'm looking for. It's not the tool's fault. It's actually just changing the behavior. So if you are absolutely going to use folders, then maybe I like to say, if you're going to use folders, just use 1 folder level, maybe 2, absolute max 3. But don't go 4, 5, 6 levels deep of folders. And please do not break permissions on and share different permission levels with different folders, because it's going to be a mess at some point, and you're not going to know who has access to what. So try to limit that as well. And determine who needs access. Let's just say the governance plan for how people interact with files within Microsoft 365. SharePoint is around sharing for everyone in the organization. If it's Teams for, team collaboration, team member collaboration, and OneDrive is for your personal use, then you may decide those files that you have stored in your computer or stored on a file share, maybe those need to not just be dumped into OneDrive, and perhaps there's a better strategy and a use case if everyone needs to see this information. Because sometimes what people will do is they'll send an email and they'll attach the file and they'll share with everyone. Well, this is a little different now. Like ideally, if you have a document that you want to share with everyone, then you're going to store it in the intranet that you all may have, or the place where everyone in the or agency has access, versus you having to reshare those files with people over and over again. And so that's why it's a good practice to review permissions, more so of like who needs access to these documents now. Some organizations will say that your governance plan is, OneDrive is for just your personal files and no one has access to it. Sometimes companies are perfectly fine people sharing with one or two people from OneDrive. And so it just really all depends on the governance approach for the organization. Last but not least, number 5 is to attend training. So think of the way that you are currently working now and how that's going to shift. The goal is for you not to get stuck. The goal is for you to adopt these new strategies and these new tools. So definitely attend training because it's going to make life easier. So whether it's instructor-led training, whether or not it is video on-demand training, just some kind of resource that's going to help you move along with understanding how the tools actually work and shifting your work patterns. And of course, I'm a button pusher. So if you want to push buttons and figure out what they do, then do that. But just take the time to learn the tools versus getting discouraged and absolutely hating this migration because it's happening. So you have to kind of embrace it and move forward and adopt it and understand how it works. And it should make life easier. It shouldn't make it harder. So that would be my advice. Your technical team, before they do the migration, they should be running reports to kind of identify some of the issues that may occur before they do the migration. So the goal is to, of course, try to be proactive from the technical perspective to help the end users with the smooth transition as much as possible. And of course, I would say do not allow anyone, any technical team, to do a migration of all your files and subfolders and not organize it first. You should not agree to a lift and shift of content from your file shares, network shares, whatever you want to call them, or the C drive or local storage of files into SharePoint or OneDrive without organizing those files. I can't stress it enough because we definitely work with organizations who bring us on in order to do the migrations. And we also have worked with a few organizations where, that happened, where subfolders and files were just migrated over into one location. So I would say spend the time and the effort early on to organize and then move over your files. So if you have more questions, feel free to submit your questions to csay's@gmail.com and subscribe to CSay's Collab Space.